Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's the old storyteller here from Nelson, BC. I wanted to tell you a few things about the early days here. I wanted to show you a gift that my dad made up here a number of years ago. He had this. He'd seen a few of these homemade clocks at some of the markets and stuff in his days, and he had a wood lathe. So it looks like to me that when he thought about that and thought about that and thought, it'd be a really nice thing if I could make one of those, because he had a wood lathe and he made all those spindles out of wood, and there's a little bit of a date thing on the side there when he put it together too. So this is the kind of a pass it on family heirloom type of thing that gets made by the grandfather or somebody in the family as a memorandum. And he used to make up all kinds of stuff. He would make up furniture for people. He'd make up furniture for people. He would make up chairs and coffee tables. In a couple of cases, he made up some china cabinets and stuff like that. And he left those with family members. And he made up a couple of little dressers for boys, for our kids to keep their clothes in when they were young, and they still got them. And I think sometimes it's nice like that. I'm really privileged to have that. I'm going to pass it on to my kid brother and pass it on along the family when I get older. And it's a kind of a perpetual memory that we can remember somebody great in the family who did something extra special. And I think he did that so people would remember him for his skills. He had some really good mechanical skills and some woodworking skills, and he did that so people would recognize something that he did. Now, what we're doing right now, we're talking about things right now that people will talk about at our funeral, if we have one. I don't have a funeral planned. That's up to the kids, but I've left a lot of pictures and videos and talks like this that can be played anytime they want to review some of the talks or the thoughts. I want to tell you about a couple of things. The one thing that made a big impression on me, I seen a couple of deaths in my family before my wife passed away, and I was about 17 years old, I guess, and Dad said to me one day, my grandmother who raised me, my mother died when I was born, giving birth to me, and so my dad went to her and said, could you raise the boy? And she said, yes. I was laying there crapping my pants and crying at that point, and she said, I will do that, but she said, you can't come back and take him once he's 2 or 3 years old. If I'm going to take him as a baby, I'm going to get attached to him, and I want to raise him up until he's a man. So Dad made that arrangement with her, and he kept it. But I had a good relationship with my uncle and my grandma, where I was raised on the farm, and Dad used to come out and bring bicycles and wagons and all kinds of toys and stuff like that. Sometimes they weren't new, but they were rebuilt and in good shape. I had a great time on the farm, and we raised all animals and pigs, and we had chickens, and we had beef, and we had hogs, and all kinds of good food. And there wasn't much money, but we had a great time. We had lots of good food, and we learned how to look after animals and how to butcher them and stuff like that, how to look after equipment. It was a great life. And I eventually I moved into town and got myself a job, and I was living in a rented building, and Dad phoned me up one day, and he said, you might want to come up and go to the hospital. He said, my mom is up there, it's your grandma, and he said, I don't think she's going to live very long because she's in the emergency room, and she's just having trouble breathing. And at that particular point in time, there weren't very few high-powered drugs, so she had pneumonia, and so I walked into the room, and she's laying there, slobbering out the side of her mouth, and she was just running out of air. So I tried to talk to her, and I said, hey, Grandma, I love you. Thank you very much for everything. And she couldn't understand. She was in the throes of death at that point. So I stayed there for a while until she eventually quit breathing, and Dad came in, and we cried a little bit and hugged each other and said goodbye to her, and that was a sad time. It was my first experience of seeing death. I hadn't seen my mom die because I was just a baby at the time. And then I guess it was about 10 years later, I got a call from Grand Prairie from the cemetery there, from the funeral home, because my uncle had, him and another guy had been down to Grand Prairie shopping, and they had a couple of beer, and they're walking out of the beer hall to go back to their pickup. It was about an 80 mile drive to Dawson Creek, and they're in good shape. But as my uncle were walking down the street, he fell, and he grabbed his chest, and he fell down on the street, and of course they called the ambulance, and he'd had a massive heart attack. So he died there. And in his wallet, he had a piece of paper with my name on it, because I was the person to look after. He left me in the will, and I was to look after his death and his funeral. So I phoned my dad, and I said, "Dad, can I use your car?" I said, "I'd like to take the back seat out, and I'd drive to Grand Prairie and then pick up my Uncle Oliver's body after me arrange the funeral." So I knew I had been to the funeral home before, so I knew what to do, and it was kind of interesting. He was actually he had grown up as a Catholic in church, but he never went to church. His mom and dad did, but as a kid they never went to church. So when it come to raising the going for the funeral, I went to the Catholic Church. Of course, I wasn't a member. I was a United Church. So I went to the Catholic Church and asked him if I could have him make arrangements to make a funeral for him, and they said, "Well, what is his name?" And I told them Oliver Jr. Netto. "Well, I don't remember seeing him at our church." I said, "Well, I don't think he meant a church." I said, "I can't remember going to church as a kid." Well, he said, "If he didn't come to our church, I don't think we can do much for you." So I said, "Well, okay." So I went to the United Church and talked to the minister, and I said, "I got a problem with my uncle's passing away." And he said, "What do you need?" I said, "I just need you to say a few words. I'm going to get a grave dug for him, and I'm have to get a casket for him, and then if you wouldn't mind coming out, we'll have a little bit of a service in town, and then we'll go to the graveyard, and if you wouldn't mind saying a few a few words." And he said, "No, no big deal." He said, "I do it all the time. Just tell me when." So we set the date up, and I said, "How much is it going to cost?" He said, "There's no charge." He said, if you can afford $5 or $10 or whatever, or a couple of chickens or whatever," he said, "that's fine." So we did. Came out and done the funeral, and I hadn't put a gravestone on one of those graves for about 30 years. So after about the 30th year went by, I was kind of guilty. I thought, well, here I left me in charge of their lives and their deaths, and and I haven't even marked the grave. So what I did, I went down and I dug up to the city of Dawson Creek, and I found out the grave markers, and I found the one that was there for my mother when she died in 1936. And I also found the spot where my grandmother and my uncle were buried as well. So we came back to Nelson, and there was a place here that was looking after making the tombstones, and so I went in there and talked to him and said, "Would you make up 3 stones?" And I gave him the names, and they were $375 a stone. So the following year, Barbara and I put them in the motorhome, and we took them up and put the grave markers on them, and they're on them today. So we fulfilled our obligations to the people. It was kind of interesting. It's not pretty seeing death though, and the second death that I seen was when Barb passed away, and she had about in 2018. She woke up one morning and we were out camping with the motorhome, and she started coughing up blood, and we took her to Cologne. I flew her over to Cologne, and they found that she had a burst vein in her lung. So they went up through the vein in her leg and found the break, and they fixed it, but for a period of 3 years, she was coughing up blood all the time and passing out on the floor and not having a pretty time riding around in a wheelchair and wearing an oxygen tank. And so one day we're at the hospital after about 3 years of that, and her doctor came in and he sat on the edge of her bed and he said, "I'm sorry." He said, "I can't fix your wife." And his specialist can't fix her. And he said, "She's too old to do a lung transplant." And so I was looking at Barbara, she was looking at me, and I said, "How long has she got?" And he said, "Well, maybe 3 months." So Barb said to me, "We've been married for 55 years. She said, if my heart ever stops or I have a heart attack, don't start it, just let me go." She said, My life is no good anymore. It's not your fault. It's the fact that, my body's deteriorated now and I'm getting old and I'm just asking you to let me die. So we had that. I said, you got it. That's your wish. That you got that. So a week and a half later, it happened at the hospital. She was up there getting a blood test, and she's sitting in a wheelchair, and she looked at me, and her eyes were really bright blue, and I seen that when her dad died, and I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I got a real pain in my chest," and she folded over. So I rolled her into the emergency ward, and they said within 1 minute she'd had a massive stroke, and they started to shove stuff down her throat to try and wake her up, and I said, "No. She has told me that she doesn't want to live anymore, so just leave her alone. If she is gone, let her be gone. If she's with God, that's where she wants to be. All we have to do is emergency ward." I said, "No, my wife told me to not let you do what you're trying to do now. I appreciate you want to try and bring her back, but she's far beyond that. Let her go." So they let her pass on, and it was good. It was great. It was a little bit of a hard thing to do, but seeing people die is not a pretty thing, but it's the end of life. And if there's no more pain and suffering, and we made a promise to them, we have to do that. Now with the right to die with dignity forms, now I have mine made up, and my two sons know that it's written down, signed by two doctors. If I'm in the hospital with an incurable disease, or I got Alzheimer's so bad that I don't know them when they come to see me, they can talk to the two doctors involved and arrange the day that I go to sleep. I have a prepaid funeral. The boys know what to do with the ashes. So we have to live on and enjoy each and every moment, each and every one of us out there listening, and all the people that aren't listening. Just make sure that if there's anything you like, if you enjoy doing, that you're doing today, because we never know how many Mondays or Fridays, how many days we got at all. But we always have to sit back and relax and say, thank you for all the good times we had. We had good life with people, and we grew up with our mums and dads, and I didn't grow up with my mom, but I had a grandma who was the same thing as a mom to me. And then I had my second mom, my stepmom, which was Mom Judy, that was Dad's second wife. And then I had Barbara, my real wife. So life has been good, and we can't complain. It doesn't do any good anyway. So if we wake up in the morning and we're healthy and we're able to drive and walk and talk, it's great. And I wanted to bring one more thing forward. It's a bit of a recognition about kindness. We meet people always through our lives who are special. And special means to say that when you talk to them, you feel comfortable, and you feel like you've known them for years and years and years, and you talk, and you sit there and talk, and all of a sudden you look at your watch and a couple of hours have gone by. It's because we grew up in similar times, and our minds are very close to the same, and we grew up in times with our parents, or we served hard times, but similar experiences. And I want to tell you about a time where Barb, I don't know if I ever told you in this video or not, but if I did, I'm going to repeat it anyway. It's a fun thing. We were sitting at the A&W one time about 1975 with our two boys, Lloyd and Glenn, having a hamburger, and a lady walked in with a boy and a girl, and they'd be about 8 or 10 years old, and they walked up to the counter, and the girl said, "Mom, I'd like a hamburger and some chips and some ice cream." And the boy said, "Yeah, me too." And she looked at him, and she was almost crying. He had a tear running down her eye. She said, "I'm sorry, kid." She said, "I don't have any extra money." She said, we have some food at home, but she said, "I don't have the extra money there. I'm sorry." And the kids were a little bit, "Oh, Mom," and she said, "Well, I'm sorry." And Barb bumped me, my wife. She said, "Did you hear that?" She said, the boy and the girl asked their mom if they could have a hamburger and some chips and some ice cream, and she said they couldn't afford it. She reached in her wallet and she pulled out $10 and she gave it to me. At that time, you could get 4 burgers easy for $10. And she said, "Go over and tell the lady that we want to buy it. I want to pay for it for the girls, for the boy and the girl." And so I went over and I said to the lady, "Look, lady, I'm sorry I introduced myself." I said, "That's my wife sitting over there and our two boys." And my wife was over eavesdropping accidentally on you when your kids ask you about having a hamburger. And she heard you say that a very painful thing like that, you couldn't afford to buy him one. So my wife has kindly volunteered to pay for it for you, and here's $10, and I want you to have that as a gift. And she said, you don't have to do that. I said, yes, I do. My wife is a very kind person, and she can afford it, and we can afford it, and it's a gift from our family to your family. So they gave us all hugs, and they went out of the cafe smiling and laughing, and I was really happy about that. And that's what the kind of a person that Barb was. You know, she would sew up clothes for people, and she would go and cook for somebody if somebody needed a meal cooked or something like that. She's always into the kindness mode, sharing and kindness. Wonderful lady. We spent a wonderful time together. And I'm asking you to sit back and go back through your fondest memories now and see how many people that you have, similar people that you can think of in your lifetime that made life very interesting and it created happiness for you. And take a look around and see if you've got anything that you've got on the wall or also on the shelf or in the old picture album, memories of your mom and dad or anybody in your family who were very special and did some things for you when you were growing up. And relive those moments because it's happy times for us. We don't have to cry. If a tear comes to our eye when we're thinking about it, that's okay, but it should be a tear of happiness. It's not grief. We had some grief when we lost them, but we had to realize that death is there for a reason. It takes away all the pain and suffering. So we wish you guys all a great evening and hope you live to be 117. Good night.